folks, welcome to another edition of the Ominous Hour. I'm sure most of you will recognize the background music. Alles Zarathustra, Richard Strauss. I thought that might be fairly appropriate for the topic of the day. Let's see. Before we get into the topic of the day, I want to let you know about a couple of things I discovered in the last few days, especially yesterday and today, that you might want to be aware of. That are basically some pieces of data related to events going on this year that sort of form a pattern. Now, if you know much about the setup of this planet, you will know that it was designed to be a breeding ground for chosen species, for an experiment I call the Gaia experiment. And there are a number of patterns built into this pattern, this system, this planet, that have a great deal of significance. The pattern we talk most about is the precession of the equinoxes that gives us the basically the ages of the zodiac. We talk about quite often. There are a lot of other patterns, though, basically formed by celestial objects which have a periodicity. Now, we have three that came up to me today, or actually one I've known about for several days, and two that kind of came up today that could be very significant for this year, things that don't occur in the same year very often. And generally, when you have major events, celestial events, or even terrestrial events that only happen so often and have a periodicity, this is an important thing. So one that you may have heard of recently, if you've gone further than talking about the coming eclipse, which is as far as most apocalyptic content on YouTube gets. Here's some more that are more pertinent and will give you an idea of the kind of event we're going through. Just this week, there's been some talk about a comet coming around that only comes around every 71 years. A very well-known comet, one that has been observed for a long time, and has come to be called the Devil Comet. It's called that because the way that it has formed has caused it to basically look like a little guy with horns, i.e. the devil, or one could also posit that it is a Tauran comet, because bulls have horns too. And again, celestial bulls are a very important part of our spiritual past, as I've been telling you in other segments. In fact, the last non-human messiah was Chiron, a centaur, who was not half horse, not a centipus, was a centaur. And this is going to tie into some of the other things that I need to tell you about. I just learned that there is another event that is supposed to happen this year. Hasn't happened yet, but it's expected to. Another very interesting synchronicity. There is a particular system in, let's see, what's the name of the constellation? There's a particular star in the constellation called Corona Borealis, which has a very special kind of star, which is a repeating nova. and basically has at least they, this is what they theorize because they can't observe it directly. But the theory is that there's a particular composition of this star that causes it to periodically go nova, but not completely nova, to basically go nova for a little bit and then settle into burning fuel again, whatever it's burning. I don't know what stage it's in. But it has a periodicity that has been observed, may even be related to, I think that they said the first observation, they believe, was in 1217. Until recently, they didn't know what it was. They thought it was a comet, they thought it was this, they thought it was that. It's not until this past generation that we've been able to observe this and understand it well enough to know that it is a nova, not a comet. It is not in our solar system. It is beyond. And this is an event that would get notice. It's like suddenly bright spot that will last for not too long. Maybe, I don't know, I didn't see in the literature whether it was going to be a few days or a month or something like that. The researcher Anton Petrov, whose channel I heard it from, didn't mention. It only mentioned that it was expected this year, and he was guessing maybe around September, but had said, well, maybe it already occurred and just nobody saw it because there was cloud cover or something. So, jury's out on that one. But that has a periodicity of 80 years. Now, if you take 80 times 71, that will give you a certain number. And that is how often both of these events would occur in the same year. Okay, which is kind of similar to how we calculate other kinds of, like the precession of the equinoxes is based upon a synchronicity of multiple events. And when they get back into complete alignment is a complete cycle of the precession. So if we do this particular one, let's multiply 71 times 80, we get 5,680 years, which in our current calendar would be 3,656 BC. Okay, now what's interesting about 3,656 BC is several things. For one, this is about the time that one would, if one was reading the Bible certain ways, as a creationist might, would date the beginning of creation, which has been largely discredited by science, but bear with me, it's going to make sense. It's also very, very much aligned with the time that we see the first writing emerge, even though there was evidence of civilizations before that. This is the time where we see the first evidence of writing and the first evidence of basically higher thought. Now, if you look at the ages of the zodiac, this falls right about the dead center of the age of, guess what? Taurus. Yes, indeed. Which is the age that I've told you is when this last non-human Messiah, Chiron the Centaur, came from Alpha Centauri to help humanity survive what was a coming cataclysm, basically an attack of the adversary. that was going to stomp down on humanity again because they were beginning to develop technology and to become more conscious. And that's when the adversary, the hive mind entity, whose top dog is Lilith, shape-shifting demon, whose minions created humanity as slaves for their hive mind conquerors of this planet. Okay, that's how humanity got enough brains to be a slave, which is basically how the story goes, how humanity's version 1 was created. Now, there was a version 2 that was instigated by the other side. The other side in this universe is Lucifer's team, because God was not here. God was incarnating. God was learning under the same system that we all face. So the Luciferians were the ones that upgraded humanity in the Aryan Age that we also think of as the Age of Atlantis. It was an age of technology, an age of basically trying to build this new species into one that could defend the planet against the adversary and advance the plan here. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you the whole story again, but basically this centaur was the last of his kind who escaped from Alpha Centauri when the adversary basically wiped out their planet. The way they usually do, they cause people to go crazy and start killing each other and driving division and insane behavior. That sounds familiar? That was what the Centaur Chiron came to put the kibosh on here and get us so we didn't destroy each other. And the upshot of it was that new forms of government began to take root that were human-led and were, or maybe not human-led, but led by entities that could resist the hive mind and could detect them. And this is how we survived that era. There's a great play you really should see sometime called The Skin of Our Teeth. It's by the same playwright that wrote Our Town, in fact. Lesser known work of Thornton Wilder. But this is basically a very inspired play about how we've always seemed to escape by the skin of our teeth from every disaster that hit this species. And it's kind of a comedy. It's basically got the gods talking about that, how we've gotten through so many scrapes and everything, and we'll get through one again. So this was very prophetic play. At any rate, that's two of the synchronicities. The third one that came into view today is an interesting portent that came from China. They are seeing a very weird thing that nobody has any idea what's going on. Basically, they are seeing mass blooming of bamboo. Now, normally, bamboo trees only bloom when they hit full size. So they're big, tall, 20, 30 feet high trees. And then they will bloom, and they only bloom every 60 years. So it's not a common occurrence. But this year they are seeing mass blooming of young bamboo. The barely finger-sized shoots that are coming up. And they're really freaked out by that, because there is a history, there is a tradition that flowering bamboo means something not so good is going to happen. And in general, those traditions are based on truth. And this seems to be a particularly special year of bamboo flowering. Now, if you take those three numbers and say, okay, this is every 60 years, right? You've got another that's every 71 years and another that's every 80 years. How often would all of those three happen together? When was the last time they were all in sync? You multiply them together, and lo and behold, you get about 340,000 years ago. Now, think back. What happened 340,000 years ago? Well, if you look, that is roughly the time when we find the first anatomically modern humans in the fossil record. Let's turn this down a little bit more. That's kind of a raccoon's piece. Okay, so we've got some synchronicities this year that are pretty special. We've got one synchronous with basically the pass down of being the chosen species from the centaurs to humanity, and I think that was the final pass, right? After that, we find that there is no significant record of therianthropes being on this planet. There are maybe some holdouts that are kind of hiding elsewhere, mermaids and things like that. There's stories of reptilians in the earth or whatever, but pretty much humanity was kind of left on its own at that point and set on autopilot. So that's basically the point at which old mythology, old traditions of gods and so forth, kind of got carried on with maybe not so much overt evidence of those things actually happening. And once we develop language and writing, well, language is already developed at that point. Once we had writing, they started writing down these stories that had been passed down orally. And our first accounts, mythological accounts, occur in the Sumerian Enuma Elish, roughly about 3,000 years ago. And so that is our earliest race memory of this earlier time, which does not include anything about centaurs. But this centaur legend comes from the Greeks, and as we know from Plato, the Greeks were in close contact with Egypt, and in fact had been able to glean a lot of wisdom, a lot of ancient knowledge from Egypt, which for some reason was lost. It's not in the Bible, even though the Hebrews originated from Egypt. Somebody had already committed some cultural Marxism on the record there, so that the knowledge of this earlier age was only carried forward by maybe some, well, the story is Plato got it from Solon, an ancestor of his, who got it from a priest in Egypt. And it was, kind of like secret knowledge that not everybody got because, well, maybe for the same reason that we're currently not sharing all the knowledge we have about visitations by alien or extra-dimensional folks, despite the fact that we have a number of whistleblowers who have come out, and we have all sorts of old newspaper articles and stuff like that that indicates there was indeed something going on that was covered up. At any rate, this is this very special year. I'm sure people are going to be finding more synchronicities like that. But I think those are two very important ones for this year, because it ties into why this year is so special. It is basically the completion of the Gaia experiment, at least enough that we don't have to go make another minor version before we release it. We're done, which is what I've been talking about for a while. Maybe the last couple of months is leading up to that, and explaining how the simulation multiverse works. Okay, so with that preface, what is today's topic? I think I'll introduce the topic before I talk about the artwork behind me. I'm going to call this one the physics of NPCs, non-player characters, the Amoebas and Planarians of consciousness. Where are we going with this? I think it's important for people to understand better what a non-player character is and how non-player characters evolve and emerge. Because this is very, very important to this event we're going through. It's an evolutionary event, it's an evolving event, not only evolving a better version of God, but evolving better versions of everything. And I will show you how that works in talking about NPCs. So before I do that, let's tell you what my idea was for this background art. I wasn't too impressed with what the art AI did this time, but I'll tell you the prompt I gave it. I said, show me Amoebas and Planarians worshiping their gods. And I don't think the art AI really had much idea of what they would worship. I think they tried to convey that in these two versions, some sort of light above that was generating their sense of divinity. I guess that is maybe a reasonable fit for the idea. But I wasn't too impressed with any of the pictures they gave me, so I'm not going to go into any more detail there. Let's move from there to just a tad bit of review. Now, if you remember a few episodes back, I talked about how the first version of the universe, the first thought universe, was created in God's mind. This was basically a process of creating all of the thoughts necessary to start physical creation. And that's the development of that went through phases and wasn't ready to start testing until a creation engine was devised to basically start doing physical creation. Now, as these thoughts were developing, non-player characters were being created, non-player thoughts. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, well, let's think about that. If you are a quantum thinker, your NPC thoughts are things that are separate. You know, you can say, oh, this is an idea. That's a non-player character. It's a distinct thought to its creator. Now, a level 0 quantum thought, NPC, would be just some random unconnected thought. We have those all the time, just daydreaming or whatever. You'll think up something and it'll be there for a second and then it's gone. has a very short lifetime. And again, talking about lifetimes of thoughts, let's review how time-space works. Okay, so a high-level thought, which a high-level thought quanta the highest level thought quanta would be God, sets a substrate. Basically, a thought emerges, it hits a high point of, okay, this is as far as I can take this idea, and then beyond that, if you keep thinking about it, you don't get any further, and that's one cycle of thought. You can repeat that cycle if you want to see if the result ends up in the same place, and you might get multiple versions of a particular thought that way. Within each of these cycles of thought, you can have sub-thoughts, characters that are needed to support this main thought. And these characters can vary too, but at some point when this simulation has gone long enough, has run through enough iterations, some of these characters will be set. It's like this is the perfect definition of that character. I don't need to work on it anymore. I'm going to make it a non-player character. I'm going to make it a fixed entity and work on some other characters. By the way, this all is the kind of stuff that I was figuring out roughly about 4 years ago was when I had the hardest time going through these ideas, and it very nearly drove me crazy. I've lived the movie A Beautiful Mind personally. So if this doesn't grok with you, if it gives you a headache, you're not ready for it yet. Just move on. You don't need to necessarily know this. This is for experimentalists, for physicists, for scientists, for those who are curious to understand how creation really works. Okay, so basically you could see that NPCs in this thought universe would be, random unconnected thoughts, or level 0 NPCs that have very little permanence and very little use. In fact, you can probably discard them. Level 1 NPCs are universal invariant concepts like 1, 0, things that will never change. You might give it a different name, you might give it a different identifier, you might use it differently, but it's an invariant. Level 2 NPCs at this stage would be basically single variant relative concepts. In other words, integers, operators, points on a line, how to add two dates, how to subtract them, how to add distance, subtract distance, maybe how to convert distances from one coordinate system to another. That you could develop with a linear thought process. The level 3 NPCs would have emerged in a 2D space, and that would include, algebra, 2D geometry, and so forth. All the things that you can derive there. They're very solid concepts. They won't be changing, but they might be defined in different coordinate systems, in different units, so they are still somewhat variant. And there may be additional laws that apply that we haven't figured out yet that will make these things change or take, new theorems will emerge, new relationships will be made depending on how we actually have a space. And if you understand, if you've studied Einstein's relativistic theory, you know that space may not be, a plane may not actually be flat. You could have a plane that has some shape to it, and if you're on that plane, the shape looks flat. This is kind of like, the standard way of viewing this is the way that they draw the gravity well of a black hole. So that would be a case of, that's why these aren't universal invariant concepts, because they depend upon, they could be defined differently in different universes, if you will. From there you go to 3D and solids, and beyond that you're entering kind of the area of, well, this is pure thinking. These are concepts like variables, equations, abstract math concepts like infinity, or negative numbers, or irrational numbers. Things like languages using numbers, where the number is representative of something else. This is where thought becomes more abstract, and this is exactly correlates with the idea that after you get past 4 dimensions, the next dimension becomes a more spiritual one, without form. Okay? So the same process you can follow to think about, well, how could you design physical non-player characters using quantum thoughts? Your first one might be, okay, I need something that's like a billiard ball. Let's call it a proton. What can I do with it? Well, the next level of this thinking would say, okay, I can give it a velocity and momentum. So some basic physical properties that allow me to view this thing moving in a line. Next phase might be, okay, well, let's see. Let's invent linear energy and force. Can I have a collision of 2 of these in a linear world, and what happens? Okay, so that then, basically gives you the repulsive force of billiard balls. Adding on to that, let's investigate planar dynamics. Again, playing around with what can you do in a plane, and then you have basically physics of hitting at an angle, and at what angle do the protons split off in. Graduate that to 3D, and you basically got proton billiards. You've got a bunch of protons running around, and mind you, these are characters. You're developing these behavioral constants by allowing them to vary and saying, okay, what works best? What is the best law to have here? Once the players get tired of trying out every combination, that game's not fun anymore, and you make it into a non-player character. Add energy carriers, photons. That gives you like a programmable persistent pool cue. And then you've really got the game of billiards you can play, and you could let other consciousnesses freely play that game and make it a game that's not just for non-player characters, that you could roll out to free-willed characters and have a competition with. Add on some other particles and forces, and that game makes the game a little bit more varied and fun. You know, this is exactly what they did with Pong. They started out with a very simple model of, you know, a paddle here, a paddle there, and a ball going back and forth with standard physics, and then they added more things. They added little barriers in the middle, so sometimes if it was on a certain trajectory, it wouldn't get all the way to the other paddle, it would bounce back. Or they would add other attractors, if you will, so that the ball didn't always go in a linear pattern, but was maybe pulled by the gravity of another object. You can do all sorts of things, make all sorts of variants of this game doing that. Eventually, you have enough particles and forces to start assembling main sequence stars and working out the details of stellar formation and evolution. Same with secondary sequence stars, and the upshot of this is you end up with a language, an elemental language. And those elementals were characters at one point. They were units, quanta of consciousness, who were allowed to experiment on their own. Because God is not stupid. God would not want to have to do everything himself. Only a dumb scientist would do that, would sit in a lab all by themselves and not get any grad students to help them out, keep everything in secret. There's sometimes when you need that, when you're planning the next simulation, when you figure out which grad students you need and what specialties they need to have. But then you go and run the experiment once you've sort of thought planned it. You go and implement it, and then you might have several iterations of the experiment. If you didn't quite plan right, you might, okay, this didn't work, it didn't converge, I didn't get the result that I was hoping out of it. Let's add a few more variables, a few more grad students, some more resources from the college or whatever, and run this experiment again. And eventually you could come up with the elementary language. This wouldn't be the full language. It would be just enough to get to a certain point where the players were like, oh, we're tired of playing this, let's give us a new game. Not all of them, some souls, that's all they're interested in. Chemists, physicists will spend their entire career focusing on one particle, one kind of interaction. One kind of star, one particular element that they're trying to figure out the properties of, or work out new isotopes of and figure out how they're different chemically. So this game is still going on, but mostly played by non-player characters. Once you have the properties of hydrogen pretty well laid out, nobody wants to go play a hydrogen atom unless they're going to be part of, you know, a groundbreaking new experiment. And we'll get the chance to, from a heavenly standpoint, share the Nobel Prize with the human physicist that thinks that they came up with some new idea. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe they were only rediscovering an idea that was already well known by a previous chosen species. And you know, this is kind of where some of the hubris of humanity needs to be pointed out. The vast majority of what humans are doing is me too kind of stuff. You may be thinking that you're God's answer to chemistry or medicine or whatever, but you're basically repeating experiments that are already done. It's just never been done by humans before. And why do you need to do it again? Because the humans might discover some different characteristics of it. They might discover that, oh, this particular technology that some previous chosen species came up with actually has some hidden warts that cause problems with species or planets like the one we're on here. And they might develop new aspects of that to make the technology more safe, to document any shortcomings, to document any gotchas, so that humans won't step on them in the future. Okay, well, how would this sort of thing contribute to the development of life? Same thing applies. At the point that elementary playing got boring, everything had been done, we had a bunch of element types, and what they could do was pretty well cast into concrete. Then the variability of it was only in, basically constructions of elements able to act independently. So individual atoms, individual particles were pretty much running almost on autopilot, very much non-player characters. And the higher level characters were ones that were collections of those, which would have been basically elemental beings. And you could envision the most simple elemental beings were fire elementals, basically beings of energy, fire and air. Water and earth would be ones of matter, matter that can move itself. Now, that game would gradually be policed more, because the players that got really good at those things would dominate, and new players would be like, well, there's nothing new to learn here. These guys, I'll never beat them. I'll never come up with an idea that gives me more consciousness, that gets the attention of God, shows that I'm a up and coming character, and that's when you need to come up with a new game. And a new game means a new version of time-space. Because, again, how you need a new version of time-space is when you've been playing this game and you get to the point where you've got all the characters you need. You're not learning anything. You keep playing the same scenarios over and over and over again, and that gets boring. Not for everybody. I mean, some souls like to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and there's a demand for that sort of soul. They're the ones that run processes that just have to keep running. You see them in humanity today. People that just want to do their job, want to get their pay, want to go to the store and buy what they want, what they're told to want. These are non-player characters. They're running on autopilot. They may think that they're acting independently, but in fact they're just following programming. And their programming is largely supplied by media, by input from other characters who are trying to get them to do what they want them to produce what they want them to make, to buy what they're making. And that's okay. That's as it should be, but this is where karma comes in. Because if you are manipulating these non-player characters in ways that are destructive. They're going to destroy a whole species. They're going to destroy parts of this planet that all these characters are living on. That's evil. That's sinful. Okay? This is very, very basic stuff. This is the physics, essentially, of religion. Religion is a physical thing. It's an important thing. A species that doesn't have religion cannot maintain a higher level of consciousness. Even if the religion is not completely accurate, it may be more useful to have the religion of Newtonian mechanics than the religion of Einsteinian or quantum mechanics. Okay? That's more true in certain dimensions, in certain scales, but it's not so useful as just Newtonian physics. So that's what we use for most everything that humans do. And the average human never learns more than an Isaac Newton level of physics. Nothing wrong with that. Or of mathematics or whatever. Not everybody needs to be Einstein. Not everyone can be Einstein. You can't keep all that information in one place. This is another piece of the nonsense that so many religions come up with of infinite knowledge, one with everything. It's bullshit. You can't condense everything into one entity. The best you can do is make them non-player characters. And what that is not all knowledge. The non-player character database, which people call source, is not all knowledge. It is the knowledge that is needed to basically spit out background. And so this leads into, well, let's talk about life. We haven't covered this yet. So life, pretty much could develop this way, much like scientists think it would. It's just that you need to have a period of directed play to develop things like RNA. It doesn't just construct itself. It's got to have some kind of a driving force. This is not necessarily God. Probably not God. God's not a specialist. God is a generalist. Big picture guy, architect. Just like in designing a smartphone, the architect of an iPhone probably knows next to nothing about how Bluetooth works, about how video works. That's for specialists. Okay? This is the only sensible way to view creation. Yes, it is directed evolution. That's where both scientists and religionists are like arguing, and neither of them is right. How stupid can that be? For over 100 years, we've been arguing, having these stupid arguments between atheists and Christians, and they don't realize that they're both wrong. If either had a convincing argument, they would put the others into the ground. Sorry, I don't know. I'm so frustrated with this species right now. At any rate, so you could see this developing in stages. RNA, okay, we've got basically organic molecules that have certain special properties that, for whatever reason, they like to play with each other. They can maybe exchange pieces. They can incorporate new pieces. They can sort of evolve, but you have to kind of throw them together. Once you throw together something that can actually stick, then you're dealing with viral dynamics. And okay, well, I found something here that can self-reproduce under certain circumstances when it finds itself in a certain environment. How can I make more of those? Can they interact with each other? And maybe that runs into, well, okay, that's as far as I can go with this technology. Let's go develop something else, and that's DNA. Something that can actually reproduce. It's a language, a programming language. An interesting discussion that's going on right now, and has been going on, is that DNA, a priori, doesn't seem to have all the information it needs to do all the things that life does, all the behaviors we observe in cells and multicellular organisms. This is another proof that the materialist scientism point of view that everything is created by random processes and evolution is behind everything is nonsense. Behavior can only evolve through conscious decisions, and this is another proof that thought is what creates matter and energy, that drives matter and energy, not the other way around. And this has been observed in experiments where they have noticed that, you know what, we thought that neurons firing were what were causing thoughts, but they've actually proven that the thoughts happen first and then the neurons fired to basically set off other reactions to the thought that came from the soul, the real mind of a quantum consciousness having a human experience. And that occurs with DNA too. How does DNA know to divide and recombine? How does it know how to repair itself? It's behavior. It's learned. This is conscious behavior. It's not high order consciousness, and it's driven in more of an AI fashion. That's essentially what a non-player character is. It's an AI soul doing what it's supposed to. And only when it encounters a situation it's never seen before is there the opportunity for standing out. And this is kind of where I was going with the idea of the picture that I used for right here, is that these non-player characters are trying to shine. And this is a very important thing to bear in mind right now, because if a non-player character in the life chain happens to exhibit a behavior that is unique and successful, at least for its lifetime, it may not actually be a behavior that's good in the long term. We see this all around us with our own technology where, oh gee, smartphones give us so much power, so much ability to do everything. But after a few generations, dumbs us down. It makes us less likely to read books, less likely to do our own research, more likely to just, tell me what they believe, Mr. Wizard. Which is a large part of what's going on in humanity right now, and is a reason that we are in one of these cycles of decay. Okay, we're in a cycle of time-space, and we are past this, we're at this critical point where we've hit the peak of what this version of the simulation can accomplish. And we're starting to decay as a chosen species. And when the chosen species decays, that is how we know that the whole simulation is decaying. Because, as I've told you, when you're doing creation experiments, you do it in successively smaller labs. Let me find the right slide here. Okay, so at the beginning, the first version of time-space would have been basically sorting out how the multiverse is structured. And that's the story that I tell you about the truth about the Big Bang. It wasn't really a Big Bang per se, but it looks like a Big Bang because it created a time-space of a certain size that was commensurate with the laws of stellar formation in the first version of that simulation. So, you know, maybe the first Big Bang was expand to a certain point and that's all you get. Not continuous expansion. Maybe it was, okay, we start out, we grow to a certain size. Maybe an earlier version was, oh crap, it's shrinking in on itself and everything collapses into, you know, one big black hole. Okay, well, that didn't work. Let's change some things. Let's run another simulation. So what we see as the Big Bang is the vestiges of an earlier simulation, which had a different midpoint. The center point was the point where it starts decaying, where, okay, this first version of the Big Bang expanded to this point and then it started decaying, or maybe it just kept expanding and nothing new, you know, there wasn't enough energy concentrated in one place to do anything new and interesting. Okay, that's also a point at which, gee, this version of time-space can only get us so far, and then the game's not fun anymore. So then we work on building universes. The most important universe is the physical universe because that's where new laws are tested and perfected. And any creator that wants to make a law that applies pretty much universally has to test it in that universe. That's Lucifer's universe. This is true of galaxies, clusters, star systems. So basically these are progressively smaller test tubes. Rather than having to make a whole universe to do a new test, okay, once you've got galaxies, you can give each of the senior creators their own galaxy to play with. And they're separate enough that they won't be mucking around in each other's test tube until maybe the point at which one of the senior creators develops a soul vehicle that's capable of getting to the other galaxy and mucking up the other players' work. And then, oh crap, they're spoiling my fun because what I wanted to do with my galaxy was make the most perfect spiral, and they're coming in and they're creating black holes in the middle of my perfect spiral galaxy. Draft. Let's stop them from doing that. And the senior creators get together, and in the next version of time space, they say, you know what? We've got to balance the game between what the more destructive players want and what the more artistic players want. And we see that in humanity, don't we? We see some people that are extremely ambitious, that want to gain power, they want to be the boss, and they will do anything to get there. And we've got others that just want to play the game. They like more time to focus on their art. And they're very frustrated that they have to spend so much time pandering to the system, doing politically correct things, playing the game to please some powerful assholes. This is another reason you can see that we're at one of these critical junctures. critical juncture that this chosen species has never faced before. This planet has faced before, though. That's basically the point at which we're told was the civilization of Atlantis. They were very technologically advanced, but they were corrupted. Okay? They reached a point where their civilization needed to fall apart. And that's basically how this game goes. We find the next midpoint, the point at which things start falling apart, and then you take that midpoint and a couple of generations around it, and that's the next messianic phase. You might only get a little bit further, and it's not a major evolution. You're not getting a major new version of something important like God or karma or whatever, Lucifer, the main characters. You might be getting a more perfect species for playing this game. And that's largely what we've been doing on this planet, is trying to develop the perfect training species. Not the smartest one ever. God knows we're not the smartest. Okay, so moving back then. This leads into this next slide, which I think will help you understand how human non-player characters contribute to messianic ages. Okay, when we find one of these points at which, the species is falling apart, cultures are collapsing, the environment is getting destroyed, whatever is happening that is causing this experiment to diverge. Okay? We play out a new scenario with some new characters. And those characters are gamed out within the mind of God first, in the highest heaven, where the senior creators do the planning. And out of that plan comes basically 12 kinds of non-player character. Because as we know, in our species, at least, previous chosen species may not have been this way. They may not have had reincarnation amnesia. In fact, many didn't, and that had to be removed. Even for God. That's why God has been incarnating too. Because the game got to a point where the only solution to move it forward, to keep everybody excited about creation and not joining on the side of the adversary, was for God to, okay, I'm going to play too, I'll forget everything, and I'll prove that the game is so good it can even make an old god better. And if I can prove that to you, then you have to keep playing my game. Otherwise, I'll never wake up, and you can run the game the way you want to forever. And that's been happening for a long time. Over 4.5 billion years. We've been playing somebody else's game while God was trying to wake up. And, this is basically why so many people are frustrated with this game. It's taken forever. It seems like it just goes in circles and circles and circles. That's because the key players have been playing against God. Two key players in particular who have the most to do with running the simulation. Lucifer, who is the god of this physical universe, who's supposed to be on God's side, but has incarnated personally too, and has sort of a worst version and a best version. The worst version is like the male Satan, the one who's kind of the archetypal, patriarchal, domineering, authoritarian. And the best version, which is like, you know, God's advocate, the one that stayed loyal and actually is trying to finish this game, has been fighting for God for so long. That's the Archangel Michael. Those are two, you know, the highest and the lowest incarnation of Lucifer so far. And this is essentially what happens when you incarnate. You generate an NPC version of your previous self from wherever your previous self was, in whatever afterlife universe or from your own universe, because, as I've told you, every soul has 12-dimensional Merkaba. 4 dimensions of physical experience, 4 of spiritual universe experience in universes of other souls, and 4 of experience in their own universe that they don't know that they're really having until they become gods themselves. Until you reach the God level, you don't realize that, whoa, I've been building my own universe every time I defied what I was programmed to do in the physical universe, or what I was programmed to do in some spiritual universe, in some afterlife. The God I was worshiping wanted me to do this, and I chose to do something else deliberately that violated their plan. Well, their plan got carried out anyway if it was an approved plan, but those rebellious actions would happen in your own universe. That's why we have this Mandela effect of not everybody remembers the same version of events. Okay, so you can see these human characters as basically assigned to 12 levels of non-player character, the role you're given. And generally the lower level characters, nobody wants those. They're not that exciting. Well, some people, I guess some do. It would depend on where the character is. Maybe a character that just wants to focus on simple things like having healthy relationships would want to be one of these NPC zeros. It's kind of a window dressing character. Random encounters with player characters, but for the most part free to do whatever they want because it really doesn't matter. And you see many people like this who are just living the way that they want to. They don't care. They don't have any higher passion. They're just doing whatever they want. Because they don't understand karma. So they are shaping their Merkaba, not knowing what they're doing. Now, if they have experience and they're incarnated this way, maybe they're just following their own plan. And they're kind of sitting in the corner doing what they want to do. And I think you know people like this that don't get involved. They just want to be in their own space. They want to do their own thing. And they isolate themselves to the greatest extent possible from everything going on in the rest of humanity. Well, that's okay. That's the kind of player they've chosen to play. They're not going to develop a much higher consciousness with that kind of a character. Well, maybe they will. I mean, depends on what their passions are, right? But they're not doing anything that is going to get noticed by the senior creators, by the gods. They might be doing things that will, maybe down the road, maybe 100 incarnations from now, will get noticed. So maybe if they're interested in art, they're mucking around doing stuff that never gets noticed, that's not going to make them famous, or does make them famous and get noticed and gets a lot of money, but earns a lot of dark karma by basically going along with tyranny, being a selling tool for the pop politically correct celebrity set that defines truth these days. NPC level 1 would be ones that are created to flesh out the must-have experiences for minor characters. So a minor character would be, let's see, what's a good example? A minor character might be the second grade teacher of Albert Einstein, or maybe the second grade teacher of the most influential person in Einstein's life. So these are characters that have some must-have things. They have to meet certain other characters in order to feed the plan. But they have quite a bit of latitude in what they can do otherwise. An NPC level 2 would be minor characters that don't directly interact with major characters. So this might be, the faculty of a school that teaches some of the friends of a major character. They would have an effect on that major character, but it's not direct, it's secondary. The next level of an NPC might be minor characters that do directly interact with major characters. Okay, and so forth. Then you might have characters that are created to flesh out must-have experiences for the major characters. And these, again, are not only human. These might be, so for instance, a must-have experience for a major character might be a close relationship with a pet, or an event that happened that somehow caught their mind and inspired them to do the thing, if they're an artist or scientist, to go in the direction that they needed to go to achieve their mission. Then you start dealing with, characters that are related to major characters, or the major characters themselves. And then you have this next layer of, major characters are ones that that have some strong effect on the Messiah candidates. The Messiah candidates are the characters that are actually going to make something, think of something, make a new law, find a new scientific discovery, found a new city or country or religion or whatever that has to happen in this cycle. And major characters would be ones that either indirectly or directly are necessary to have those Messiah candidates come forward. And I say candidates because in a Messianic period, there will be maybe many who get the call to do a certain thing. And this is why, there were a bunch of artists, a bunch of writers in the Elizabethan era, but only one, Shakespeare. Okay? Many feel the call. That's why today there are so many people who want to be a creator, but don't succeed. They can't beat the competition. They have the inspiration, they don't have the opportunities. Or they don't take the opportunities and they don't get to the finish line. Not everything has to be done by one specific character. There are a number of... The only character in each Messianic period that absolutely must be one specific person from a very specific bloodline is the capital M Messiah. because that's how the whole Messianic age rolls up into a definite, okay, did we succeed or did we not? And that success is in basically getting to a successful version of this Messiah candidate, this one random life within all this. It may not be anybody who does anything particularly special. They may have a whole bunch of influence on other little m messiahs. Let me give you a good example of that. One of the unsung capital M messiahs of the ages is a little known character in the late Roman Republic. A guy named Sertorius, Quintus Sertorius. This is a guy that, you know, if you took the time to really look at the history of Rome, would come off as, man, this guy, if it hadn't been for him, a whole bunch of bad stuff would happen, yet almost nobody knows who he is. This was a guy that rose up from very low status to become one of the main commanders during the Civil War period between, let's see, was he one of the followers, you know, the Civil War period between the Optimates and the Senate, basically the Populists and the Senate, and that was the final age that, you know, basically destroyed the Roman Republic. And if it had not been for Sertorius, who happened to be a very noble guy, he was on the side of the popular party, the Marian faction, but he actually was much more of a humanist, much more karmically tuned, and switched sides when it was made, you know, not for personal gain, but because it was the right thing to do. And his career, if you look at it, was not so ruthless as a Pompey or a Caesar, and eventually he was defeated and killed. But for a long time, he was kind of the main Roman commander in Spain, which, if you know the late Republic, Spain was one of the top areas, if you will, of recent colonization, recent assimilation into the Roman sphere. And if, you know, this is absolutely a character that was necessary to make other things happen, and was like a centerpiece of the era leading up to the era of Caesar and Octavian and you know, the transition to empire. One of the characters I think that contributed the most to the Republic not just disintegrating and you know, basically all of the recently conquered territories splitting off and never being reintegrated. But yeah, so this is an example of a little known Messiah. How do you know what's a big M Messiah versus a little Messiah? The big M Messiahs are incarnations of God. God has the most experience of any soul ever. Has seen everything. I mean, literally millions of incarnations. And is the one that designed the whole thing. Okay, is always waking up, at least partially, to what the original plan was. What do we want to get out of all this? What's the point? What's the meaning of life? Not always waking up completely, but waking up enough to know that karma is very important. That you can't pull good out of evil. And that takes a long, long time for souls to learn, and some will never learn it. Luciferian souls will have the hardest time learning how to check their ambitions and be willing to admit defeat rather than commit an evil act. They are end justify the means people. Lilithian souls are even worse. They will do absolutely anything to get ahead. They're very selfish. They're very narcissistic. You can tell that they have no sense of karma, or if they do, they have a rationalized idea of good. Virtue signaling idea of good. That's a Lilithian soul. The karmic soul has a very strong idea of good and evil, but not a strong sense of purpose. They're the ones that will keep doing the right thing, and forget to take care of themselves, forget their own development, and they will plateau very often rather than develop into the higher level of consciousness, the God level. The Borgian soul, the NPC soul, doesn't really learn anything. They're good for creating new NPCs to the extent that they do something interesting with their life that nobody's done before, or they have a look or something like that because of their DNA that we might want to reuse that character. We might want to have a character that looks like that. That's what NPCs are for. And they have their purpose in creation, and they have their opportunity to be more than that, to the extent that they do something worthy of notice. Let's see if I've covered everything I wanted to cover. Oh, this is one more thing that you need to know about this special Messianic age we're in. This is a major version of God that's coming out. Now, when the major versions come out, and we are completing the Gaia experiment, this whole reason for which humanity was created, the whole reason for which this planet was created and recreated after it was destroyed once, is coming to fruition. This is a big moment. It's essentially the completion of the development phase of creation. And now we're moving into the implementation phase. We've got the perfect vehicle for training young souls in this species. And what's essentially going to happen from now on is we're going to keep playing this central messianic time so that more characters will get to experience this time and this special version of humanity. Once they get experience here, then they can choose where they're going to go next. Some will want to keep playing this game and keep playing different characters within these three special generations between, the 1880s to now, roughly. Others will have an interest in, I'm really interested in seeing what happened in the past, because the past is different. It has a shape that's based upon previous pasts, but as we're finding out, the Big Bang doesn't seem to explain the whole universe. It's bigger than the Big Bang. Not because there have been multiple Big Bangs, but because there have been new versions of time-space tacked onto new midpoints. Every time that happens and it expands space or time, you have new things to discover. The pattern of the past will be almost the same, but there will be strange variations that will lead you to, oh, well, if I go back this far, gosh, something else happened. There's new things going on there, new paths that I can discover, new periods of history that no one took an interest in before. Because maybe something important was happening in one of these new galaxies that wasn't there before. And this ties back to the segment I did on what's up with these colored orbs that are running around the planet. Okay, these orbs are souls that have come into existence and are curious about us, as curious about us as we are about them. It's like that Dr. Seuss story, The Pants with Nobody Inside Them. Great story. This is kind of what's going on. There's a lot of discovery happening, a lot of observation, a lot of experimentation, a lot of uncertainty by all. Even if they have a higher level of technology than us, even if they think they know what was going on this planet, they don't necessarily understand how time-space works, how creation works. In fact, a lot of these characters visiting us have been basically playing this game in the last version of space-time so long that they've forgotten that there was a God. They basically are species that kind of like got to their postmodernist age and have been there thinking that, oh, there's no such thing as God. We just have science we haven't figured out yet, and we're going to keep exploring the boundaries and well, I don't know. We don't know how we were created. We just exist. Don't need to know that. That's how you can get, after billions of years, removed from this plan. And that's why we had to have some of these great resets. That's why this planet had to be destroyed, so there was enough time to forget. Why did we need to forget? Because we needed a species that didn't have it too easy. All of the previous chosen species had it too easy, and the power that they had went to their heads. They became tyrannical. They didn't have any appreciation for the souls that they used to get where they are. Now, we have to use other souls. We have to eat. And yes, plants have souls, just like animals do. You cannot get through life without any karma. You got to do it consciously. How do you consciously pay attention to karma? Don't take more than your fair share. Don't waste food. If you've got extra food, give it to somebody who can appreciate it. The same applies to other resources. Your fair share. If you take more than your fair share, you're being selfish, and selfishness is a sin. It's being blind to the needs of others. That's karmically sinful. Here's where I was going with that. As a reward for being involved in this special simulation, these 3 generations that have been so tough, we've been playing it over and over and over and over again until we finally had the Messiah wake up and figure out, oh, wow. I understand how all this works. I understand how creation happened. I can explain the whole thing in a very scientific and spiritual manner. And I can show you all of the signs that point to this being completion. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that in this channel. Some people may think I'm crazy. That's okay. It really doesn't matter what they think. It matters that we're in this special time, and I'm trying to help you learn how you can achieve the same things that somehow I have. Because every player, no matter how young, no matter how old, has a chance to become a senior creator, a chance to become a god. It takes work. It takes effort. It takes direction. You can't learn everything. And there's no one path that's going to get you there. Anybody that tells you this is the way to become enlightened is a fucking fraud. I don't know how more clearly I can state that. They might be right for some of their acolytes, if you will, some of their worshipers. They might be right for themselves, but they're not right for everybody. There's not one path that everybody needs to go down. That would end up with billions of gods that all do the same thing. That's stupid. That's anti-creative. It's unscientific. Anybody that preaches, we're all one. We just need to come together and be one. And this is nonsense. They're trying to pull you into a hive mind. This is an adversary effort. Hive minds can be useful as non-player characters. The Borg hive mind, the first hive mind, is the Borg source of non-player characters. It's a library. And every universe has access to this library, some version of it. Some universes take that librarian idea and basically write fiction. And that's okay if the fiction is written so that the characters in their fiction are having a good time. I told you, Tolkien created some universes that are quite good fiction, that characters have fun. And there's a Tolkien universe where the orcs have the most fun, and there's one where the hobbits have the most fun, and so forth. Because those role-playing games set off a whole bunch of creative effort that is creating alternate realities that are fun for people, that are a good place to go have some R&R in between physical incarnations. And we need that. You need some reset time. Sometimes characters will want to stay there permanently. They will become non-player characters in that universe. Not necessarily non-player characters everywhere, because that universe doesn't serve creation. It's not one that we need to get to the next version. Okay, so this is the another point I wanted to make here is that the reason we have hive minds, the reason we have non-player characters, is because we don't want to have that. One of the problems that I consider the many worlds solution to string theory and to quantum phenomena is that, gosh, well, that means there should be infinite universes and infinities on infinities, and you know, what's the point of that? Well, no, there's not infinite universes. There are temporary universes that will come into play for a very short time because a non-player character is doing something off the beaten track. But if they don't do anything that particularly noteworthy, then they get reassimilated with the Borg. And so their temporary universe gets reintegrated with the NPC database, which is a very compact and focused database. Okay, it takes a certain amount of energy to run a universe. And spiritual energy can only be created by the interplay of quanta of thought, by thought processes. And those thought processes across universes are governed by karma. And the connection between universes basically determines what energy is transferred. And the game is designed so that God's universe, the top level planning universe where the senior creators work, which I talked about a few segments ago, because that's got to drive future simulations. If the energy dries up in a universe, no thoughts are going into that, it will essentially become dormant and will only exist in maybe a prototypical NPC version. So, for instance, if the interest in Tolkien goes away, if we lose the original writings and it's just like a vague mythology of some time, like some of our ancient memories are, it's very vague, we don't have all the details. That's because it's been condensed to an NPC form. It's been condensed to just the information that is essential to keep the current time space, to keep adding to the number of universes that are useful, that characters want to go to. Now, ultimately, no characters are going to want to go to a universe that's run like a Matrix movie, where you're milked for your spiritual energy, usually using fear and negative emotions, because those are strong emotions. They generate more spiritual energy than good emotions on the average. And this has been basically part of why it's taken so long to get to this point in creation. We have been finding ways to combat the adversary consciousness that are generating dark energies, dark matter. We want to take the energy from those universes to the point where they basically dry up and shrivel and die. And they're just a vague memory in the NPC database. We keep enough, as I told you, what the highest heaven looks like. There is a Lilithian component, an evil component in the highest heaven. But it is a training. It's for training purposes. It's so the characters that are born in the highest heaven know what evil looks like. They will know the kind of addictions, the kind of problems that they can start developing if they let evil invade temptation comes from, well, narcissism comes from wanting to seem better than you are, wanting everybody to think you're better than you are. Some imaginary version of you that you would like to be, you don't want to work for. So, like, this is what makes young girls think that they're beautiful when they're fat. Makes them think that, oh, I will be more attractive if I get a sex change. It's not going to happen. It's narcissism. It's foolishness. And it leads to more evil. They have darker emotions. They become turn into the outcomes that they want them to have. There is that temptation. There are those examples in the highest heaven, but they are under the control of the senior creators. They're there for a purpose, and they are monitored. So, we don't just blindly, in the highest heaven, we don't just blindly give our kids whatever movies somebody wants to put in front of them. They have a very thorough vetting process, and we enforce age restrictions on content. We don't let any old person be a teacher in the highest heaven. We don't let deviants, sexual deviants, crazy people of you only have to look around you at this age we're in here in the physical universe to know that that is stupid. You've got to raise kids the best that you can. You have to shield them from evil until they're old enough to handle it. And it's a parent's balancing act to know how much to expose your child to so that they will learn and grow healthily. And, it's been made impossible to do with the change that happened right about the time, happened in the, 2-3 decades since I was born. When I was born in 1959, almost every family in the U.S. who made enough to support the family, and the other parent could stay at home, or had enough to support a grandparent living with them, or more of an extended family, as is common in some cultures. There were people around to raise children. They weren't being raised by their fucking smartphones. And if you don't think that is destroying the species, you are blind as a bat. You are really an NPC in some dimensions. And that's a dimension that you can't afford to be an NPC in. If you are not willing to invest in learning how to be a good parent, and I don't mean a progressive parent. Oh, I want to be my child's best friend. I want them to have everything. Oh, they can't be. Is thoughtful parenting. There's no easy answer to every child. You're not going to read how to be a good parent in some self-help book written by some asshole who came out of a university, a progressive university that thinks, with cult Marxist intentions. At least if you're going to read something written by somebody who has a religious background. The destruction of religion, traditional religion, is what drove this special messianic age. The advent of postmodernist thinking, the advent of things like progressivism, religion, atheistic faiths, the center of the basically humanism is a dark religion when you think about it, because it says, oh, what's good for humanity is good for everybody, and humanity means me, because I'm obviously the best thing in humanity. This is exactly how the World Economic Forum assholes think. You go look at some of their presentations. That's how they're thinking. We're the only ones that deserve to go on. In fact, we need to destroy some of them. These people are destroying our environment and everything, and they're just worthless ants and peons. Well, look where we're going with AI. We're not going to need all these people in the workforce, and they're just adding all this carbon to the atmosphere. So let's just quietly He knows it. Even the people that don't believe in God. And this is why we need to start listening to our new prophets and stop trying to make prophets out of old prophets. And that's what most religions are doing with this. And you know who I'm talking to, you Catholics, you fake Christians who are, oh, I can get more people to come to my church if I sell this narrative of what's going on right now. And there's some that are falling into the, oh, well, let's go along with the politically correct woke cult bullshit and welcome all the sexual deviants to our church. And there's others that are going exactly the opposite direction and saying, ooh, this is all evil. Oh, especially a different religion than we do. Suppose attacking Israel. That's bullshit. It's all political. Hamas is not a Muslim organization. ISIS is not a Muslim organization. The Ayatollahs are not real Muslims. If they were, they wouldn't be authoritarian assholes trying to control everybody through politics. They wouldn't be allied with China, who are the worst communist, atheist, genocidal organization that has ever existed on the planet. And they got to be wiped out. I'm sorry. Communism, the CCP has to end. This is the first step to getting past this. Now, I don't care if we get past this because the Messiah and put the stamp on the new version of time-space. It doesn't matter what happens to the species. We're done. Our purpose has been served. And in fact, this species will continue because this is the species whose world is in the highest heaven now. It doesn't look like the vision of Isaiah. It doesn't look like Dante's Inferno or Dante's Heaven or any other heaven that has been imagined before. It looks exactly like the time of the Messiah. The idealized time of the Messiah. We will keep raising kids in heaven the way that kids were raised in the post-World War II age in the U.S. Minus racism, minus aspects of cultural degradation, which is a psyop that's been going on since communism was invented. That's the whole idea of communism, is to weaken the existing system so that the communists can come and take over. And to use populist narratives of, oh, you're people power. You're going to get freedom. You're going to be able to do all the things you couldn't do before. You gays, transvestites, whoever, axe murderers, molesters, pedophiles, you're going to get what you want. You just need to join us and contribute. They don't give a shit about you. You're going to be the first ones thrown under the bus. That's what happened in the USSR. That's what happened in China. And that's what will happen in the US. It will happen to the whole damn world if we let the New World Order take over. They are using you as useful idiots through these stupid identity politics divisions. Using your religion against you to make you hate other people. Using your sex against you to make you hate the other sex and make you hate even your own sex and want to change it to the other sex. It's insane. These people have to be stopped, and they're not going to be stopped by God. They're not going to be stopped by the Messiah. That's not how it works. It takes all of these other characters to get the species to survive. Because it's your species. The Messiahs lived in a bazillion different than this one. Actually, the folks up in heaven are a much better species. They look like humans of this time, but they aren't limited like the humans of this time. They live as long as they want to, until they decide to go travel to another universe. And even then, they may leave a stand-in there because they want to maybe come back sometime. They're not sure that they're ready to go off and start working on their own universe yet. They want to do more training. This is how the highest heaven works. The kids born there have many choices, as I told you in the previous episode. So I'm not going to go further down that road right now. I think I'm going to wrap this one up right there. You've got an incredible opportunity right now, because if you these three, you get a reward for playing a character. Even the lowest NPC character gets a free level up. What does that mean? You're going to have a higher level of consciousness in your next incarnations. You're going to have achieved 5th level consciousness. That's the story behind the whole 5th dimension thing. Anybody who graduates in this time, who gets through this time, is going to have some spiritual awareness. Is going to get a chance to attend a different universe than just being assimilated back into the Borg, back into the NPC hive mind. Some of the universes you're headed aren't great places. They're kind of hellish places, because that's what you deserve. Of you will voluntarily want to reassimilate. The folks you see running around saying, "Oh, I can't wait to get back to Source. I can't wait to get back to Andromeda or the Pleiades or wherever I came from, Zeta Reticuli." Well, you'll get your wish. You might not be happy with your wish, because you might be dooming yourself to participate in a different space-time than this one. A different, older version of the game, because you couldn't hack this one. The highest heaven is not going to change. We've found this perfect center point where you can look back as far as possible. There's no beginning of time. You can look forward as far as possible. There's no end of time. Hope you can find a warp speed star cruiser, and you will find no limits. We don't need to keep doing major versions anymore. We don't need to remodel the highest heaven. Oh yeah, we'll make minor tweaks up there. There will be new movies coming out. There will be new kinds of music in all genres, mostly the genres that God likes, because frankly, God doesn't have any use for rap music, doesn't have any use for the stupid shit that people like Taylor Swift are cranking out. It's not good music. It's not creative. It's just a bunch of bullshit. And if you like bullshit, fine, you're just not going to be a friend that you worship that has a connection there, and will at least be able to try to groom you a little bit to be in a position to enjoy the highest heaven. Well, we're not changing it again. We're not going down that path. We have found the solution to creation, the perfect species to test everything out and develop a version of karma which is ready to roll out. A simulation that has something for everybody. You're never going to get bored. No matter how many times you play the game, you're always going to find something new to do. That's the measure of perfect creation. Think that everything was perfect in 6 days and we screwed it up. That's nonsense. That is absolute horse shit. And I don't mind saying it. And if Christians want to attack me, hey, throw your darts. Prove that I'm wrong. Nobody would want to live in a perfect universe. where everybody sits around playing harps and singing praises to God. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. You got to start thinking that way. And, I'm not just poking darts at Christians. Other religions have their own sets of nonsense. If any one of you jerks were right, we wouldn't have all the religious disputes that we have in the world. We wouldn't be at each other's throats. And every religion is oneness cultists. They're arguing over whether it's more important to worship crystals or to have a vegetarian diet and bullshit like that. It's all nonsense. If it works for you, it works for you. Doesn't mean it's good for everybody. We don't all need the same dog food. We don't all need the same God food. That's why we have many religions. We will continue to have many religions, many beliefs, many ideas of what is the perfect way to be. And the sin is forcing your ideas on others. That is tyranny. When you try to dictate to others what is good for them, that's tyranny. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to let anybody do anything they want in your community, because you don't let tyrants operate in your people riot. You don't let people groom your children. The answer is not killing them, is separating them. This is the old idea of banishment. If somebody was not getting along in a community, you would kick them out of the community. If nobody else wanted them, you would put them in jail. If you couldn't afford to put them in jail, at some point you might say, well, you know what? We can't afford to keep you up. I'm sorry, we're going to have to, nicely as we can, terminate your life. This is how you make these decisions karmically. You think about the options. You do what Yes, I do believe in the death penalty for some crimes, especially repeat crimes of a violent nature, of a sadistic nature. And pedophilia is a sadistic crime. Attraction to children is aberrant. It may happen. You may find a child attractive, but to be unable to resist it marks you as somebody who is a danger to your society. And corrupting children is about one of the worst things you can do. Because if you corrupt enough children, you will corrupt your whole society. You cannot have corrupt leaders and make progress. And that's what they're trying to do. These ones that think they're going to give you a new world and make everything better and fix climate change and reduce the population and give you all this new technology and be able to copy your essence into an AI or a robotic vehicle. These are crazy people. These are megalomaniacs. These are people that don't have any conception of God or karma. They need to be removed from our society, put in jail, maybe even removed permanently if they are that dangerous an influence. And that's got to start. It's got to start with the worst of them. And the worst of them is the Chinese Communist Party, because it has been in China since the deal Kissinger made ago, that they have moved all their black ops research programs that were going on elsewhere. Organizations like the CIA, like Mossad, like KGB, and those organizations still exist. And they outsourced to China, thinking, oh, the Chinese are so nice. They'll just do what we want, and they're so peaceful. This is nonsense, and now they're discovering, oh no, we've been played by the CCP, who are not nice guys. And the current dictator, Xi Jinping, I like to call him Shitler, is exactly the same kind of character as Hitler. Laid low, played the game, they thought they could control him, and now when Xi Jinping dies, and he will this year, or be sidelined, there will be a power struggle and the CCP will fall. This is my prophecy for the year. It may have to happen at the same time as a hot World War III, and it may be somebody uses their nukes and ends it all, and that's how Xi Jinping's going to die. But he will die. The CCP will fall this year. And that will lead to other dominoes falling, because when these fat cats in China start realizing, oh crap, the game's over here, they're going contacts of really evil shit that's gone down with the World Economic Forum in relation to the pandemic, in relation to the vaccines, in relation to all of the horrible chemicals they've been putting in stuff coming out of China, with the plausible deniability of, oh well, it's just, because it was manufactured in this factory or something and they didn't, you can't trust anything over there. They have no sense of karma. They have no sense of responsibility. They are goddamn atheists. Don't you get that? That atheists do not have any moral basis. Anyone that tells you they do are lying to you. It's easy to lie when you're a professor, when you're some couple $100,000 a year, lives in a nice house that's almost paid for, and has a lot of money coming in. They can say whatever they want. They can pretend like they're noble as hell. This is the whole woke coat from top to bottom. All these celebrity jackasses who get all the attention on the media saying, oh, things will be just perfect if you just do what we tell you. They're leading you off a cliff, folks. Don't be lemmings. Don't be non-player characters. Stand up for yourself. If you like this species and you want to continue, every one of these NPC kind of characters needs to do everything they can to oppose tyranny. That doesn't mean violently oppose. That's just creating more tyranny. Starting to shoot blindly at whoever you think is the enemy is not. And that's why the most noble souls that I can think of are folks like Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, James O'Keefe of Oh My God, who are exposing tyranny, who are risking their life, risking martyrdom to expose evil people doing evil things, making that evil public, getting those people fired, getting those organizations put under a lens by a Congress that, you know what, we better take a look at this or we're going to lose our fucking jobs too. This is what needs to happen all over the world, not just in the US. This is a disease that has affected the whole world. And there are people that want old prophecies, nonsense of the Armageddon in Israel and building the new temple, and it's bullshit. Those are old prophecies. They don't apply anymore. Jerusalem is not a holy city for anybody but fundamentalist Jews, Christians, and Muslims. In fact, Jerusalem was founded as an adversary city. After, it was the capital of Israel after Israel turned the corner from being a up and coming chosen species to being on the way out. And you see that pattern in their prophets, their messiahs. Their first messiah was Moses. Actually, the stories they made up before that were stories about other people. And they just co-opted the 12 tribe story, trying to take credit for anything that happened before they came along. The 12 tribes were not the tribes of Israel. They existed before Israel ever existed. In fact, the first version of humanity was created right here, hereabouts in Java. And the second version of humanity was created around Doggerland, which doesn't even exist. The Atlantis continent that's not there anymore. Those are the two holiest places of our species. And you're fighting over Jerusalem? God, how you don't need to do this. Stop it. Okay, that's today's lesson for the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe, interact in any way you like, and until next time, let me get back to my beautiful self. Happy karma.